Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today. I'm Deborah Garlick from Henpicked Menopause in the Workplace and Menopause Friendly. And today's session is Menopause and Stress with Dr. Rebecca Williams of Williams Stress Management. And my goodness, is this a popular subject? And of course, you can expect that fluctuating hormones during the menopause transition affect the way we respond to stress, both physically and emotionally. But why is that? And how? What difference does it make to us? And thank you very much for those of you that have already sent in your questions. And I shall put those now to Rebecca and ask her to join me to start this conversation. Good. Hi, Rebecca. How are you?
Good morning, Deborah. Well, thank you.
Good. So menopause and stress, I'm going to go straight in there and say, really, what does one have to do with another?
Well, stress and the menopause are inextricably linked. I think we have to remember that the menopause isn't just a neat little box that turns up in someone's life that's separate from everything else that's going on in their life. It is massively entangled with whatever else is going on in a woman's life and can impact upon it, just as whatever else is going on in their life can impact upon their experience of the menopause. So let's think, obviously, women can go through the menopause at any point in their life. And I will just add a point here that medically speaking, given my GP background, I should make the point that the menopause strictly medically refers to that point 12 months after someone's last period. The transitional period leading up to that point is known as the perimenopause, and beyond that point is postmenopause. But for simplicity today, I will refer to menopause as that whole transitional period. So let's just think about the time of life when generally most women are going through that period, that menopause. It's often a time of quite significant challenge in many ways. Um, Women will often have children, sometimes young children, with older women having babies now. And they'll often have teenagers at home that can be quite demanding. They may also have caring responsibility for in-laws or parents. They may have relationship challenges. Some women may be going through divorce or separation or even be widowed. They may have financial pressures, work pressures. They may have health conditions that they are dealing with in themselves or in those that they love. So there can be a lot of challenges, sources of pressure and anxiety going on in a woman's life at the time that she's going through the menopause. And then let's just think about what happens at the menopause that can actually be a source of stress for them. So for many women going through the menopause, vasomotor symptoms, which are the flushes and the sweats, are a major challenge. Now, I've had patients who've come to me expressing such embarrassment that when they were in their work, in a client-facing role, they had suddenly had a flush. It can be embarrassing, it can be uncomfortable. The night sweats can wake people up through the night, which not only results in excessive numbers of sheets and pillowcases needing washed because of the sweating, but also the disruption to sleep, which then massively impacts a woman's ability to function day to day, and her ability to process information and her health in general. Many women experience physical changes as well. They may have hair loss, hair thinning, their body image may change, their distribution of body fat changes, and they can sometimes put on weight. Some have muscle aches and joint pains. And some women also struggle with brain fog and mental health problems such as really low mood and anxiety. So these symptoms of the menopause can exacerbate symptoms of stress. And likewise, other stressors going on in a woman's life can exacerbate symptoms of the menopause. So it's a real cauldron of challenge for women.
And that's a very good word, cauldron, isn't it? Because when you were saying about some of us have children at home, some of us have caring responsibilities, and you mentioned the workplace. And to be fair, we're in a different time. Never before have we been in a time when so many of us have been working through our menopause transition, and so many of us have senior roles and very big responsibilities. It's a lot. It's a
It is
lot.
a lot. It is a
And
lot.
then along comes the menopause, and it was interesting that you mentioned the transition because the most mysterious phase of the transition, in my opinion, you might say, actually, no, I think this one is, but in my opinion, it's the perimenopause, the time before that marker, because you might be experiencing all of these things, but you might have no idea it's to do with the menopause transition. You might not realize you're entering that phase, and you could put it down to all of those other stressors, as I'm just so busy at work, I'm just so busy with family, I'm just so busy with, that sometimes that connection is not made. And
Yes,
actually,
you're absolutely
it could be life,
right.
or it could be menopause.
Yes, you're absolutely right, because it's not a neat start, middle, end, is it? The menopause. It can be surreptitious, it can be gradual. For some women, there's very little that changes, and for others, it's really dramatic, and it can start quite early. Even early 40s, and obviously other women can go through the premature menopause. We're not talking about that here, but even early 40s, some women can start to experience perimenopausal symptoms and really have no idea. They assume the menopause is at 50. They think they're 10 years off, so it doesn't even enter their head. And then they start to question what's going on and what's wrong with them, and then the stress that causes can then exacerbate their symptoms and bring on stress-induced symptoms as well. So it's really important for women to realize that this may be a factor, but also to recognize that stress and the menopause come together in so many ways, and a lot of the ways of the handling it are the same for both, excluding drug treatments.
Absolutely. And the way you described the impact, for example, on sleep, well, it's a cornerstone to good health to have a good night's sleep, isn't it? And, it doesn't matter what age you are or what stage of your life you are, if you're not getting a good night's sleep, things are going to be difficult to cope with, and particularly over a longer period of time. So the fact that you're in that, I love that cauldron, is actually, it's actually a very good descriptor of how menopause and stress and menopause all come together, and then you can get to a point where it's all too much. So thinking about stress making symptoms worse, what is it? Because I think is it your 4th edition book you're in now? If you can
Yes.
just
Yes,
wave that
wave
around.
that around. Yes.
Yes, we'll provide a link for that. So if anybody wants to do that, it's a delightful book. So, thinking about how we cope with it, or how we tend to cope with it, whether we know about this is what's going on or we don't, what do you tend to see?
Well, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to talk about unhealthy coping behaviors, because unfortunately, by its very nature, when we're stressed and we're struggling, we tend to reach for quick fixes, things that make us feel better quickly. And unfortunately, especially with symptoms of the menopause, these very quick fixes can actually worsen our experience of the menopause. So it's very common for people to use alcohol as a stress reliever. Alcohol, people use it to help them feel less anxious. If they're feeling really anxious, they might use alcohol to try and calm them down. They may use alcohol just to help them relax if they're just feeling generally tense and stressed. They may also try and use alcohol to help them sleep. And although alcohol is sedating, it does not give good quality sleep. So alcohol is a very common unhealthy coping behavior, but alcohol is highly calorific, so it contributes to weight gain. It also contributes to spike in blood sugar levels, and it can worsen flushes and sweats. It can also depress someone's mood. So actually, it can have a very negative impact on some aspects of the menopause. Comfort eating is another very common stress relieving behavior, and I know chocolate is my go-to comfort food. But again, comfort eating causes spikes in sugar levels, which can affect someone's mood and energy levels. Excuse me. It also contributes to weight gain, and both food and alcohol have highly addictive impact on people, and can sometimes really take over someone's life and be used for all sorts of things that aren't have a very unhealthy impact on somebody. And then caffeine is really commonly used by people because, as you've said, when people are not sleeping well, they're more tired, and then they use caffeine as a way of getting them through the day. And caffeine is a stimulant, so it's more likely to increase your heart rate. I'm very sorry. And increase your risk of flushes and sweats and palpitations and feeling anxious. So yes, and it does worsen your flushes and sweats. So all three of those things can actually worsen symptoms of the menopause. So
Is
obviously
you say that because as you were saying that, Rebecca, the chat was going bonkers with people talking about alcohol. And it seems to be more common now for people to have a glass of wine when they get home, and that's how they deal with the day. And maybe it's
Yes.
two. But quite a few people saying, I get that. One of the ones came up saying, red wine makes my flushes worse.
Yes.
So rather than them being solutions and ways to get through, they're actually making the situation worse.
Absolutely. And that's my concerns about these things, because actually they are reached for as a quick fix to help people feel better, but actually they do cause harm. And ultimately that harm can then become significantly worse and impact on more than just that person, but everyone around them as well. So
Yeah. And I can tell you, everybody is nodding when you're talking about the weight gain, because you mentioned alcohol and you mentioned comfort eating and chocolate, which made me think, oh, I wish I hadn't mentioned that one. And, you know, all contribute to weight gain as well.
Yes.
So thinking about the science here, because, you know, we've always had stressors in our lives. So what is that stress reaction? Why do you
Yes.
get stress?
So this is a really interesting point. And I think although we use the word stress a lot, I don't think many of us stop to really think about what it actually means. So in order to understand the complex physiology of stress, we need to step back and think about something known as the acute stress response or the fight, fight, flight response. This is an evolutionary adaptation to life-threatening situations that enables us to respond with increased strength, speed, energy, and alertness. It is designed to keep us alive. So when we are faced with a dangerous situation, it is our primitive brain, that is the earliest part of our brain in evolutionary terms, which recognizes the danger and responds. And it generates a response aimed at keeping us alive. So it activates those systems designed to make us stronger and faster, the ones that are needed in this situation. So our heart rate goes up, our breathing rate goes up, our muscle tone increases, cortisol levels are increased to generate energy, our senses become more sensitive to what's going on, more alert. And at the same time, it suppresses those systems that are a drain on resources at this time. That includes our gut, our sexual reproductive health system, but very significantly, that front part of our brain, known as the higher functioning part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex. This is the part of our brain where we do our rational thinking, our objective decision making, where we process memories, and where we control our emotions. We don't need all of that in this acute situation. So the danger passes, we run, we fight it off, whatever happens, everything settles, and all our systems go back to their resting state. And that is a really important reaction still today because it saves lives. However, for most people experiencing stress in the 21st century, it's not a life or death situation and it's not short-lived, but it still generates a response from the primitive brain. So when someone is struggling with stress, their high functioning brain won't be working so well. So they'll struggle to think clearly, to make good decisions, to remember things, and to control their emotions. Secondly, the complex physiology of stress, because I've only summarized it briefly, there's a lot more that's going on in the body and the brain when we're stressed. The complex physiology means that people may develop health problems, and that can further impact their ability to function and how they feel and those around them. And thirdly, as we've just discussed, when people are stressed, they're more likely to engage with unhealthy coping behaviors, which can further exacerbate the problems that they are facing. So it's now we can understand why stress is so complex and potentially so harmful, and how the menopause, through the physiology of the menopause, combined with the stress that that generates, adds further spice to our bubbling cauldron.
It's interesting as you're saying that, because, you know, this is a healthy response. This is a natural, primitive response to make it so we can run away for something that might eat us, in effect,
Yes,
back in the day.
exactly.
And that doesn't tend to happen now very often. But those reactions are coming more from the deadline, the demands from the family, the not coping necessarily with your own menopause and feeling embarrassed about it and worrying what people might think about it.
Yes.
Those can trigger that primitive
Yes.
response.
Yes. Yes. So the primitive sorry, I was just going to say the primitive response is triggered by a threat. So it's officially meant to be a threat to life, but actually any threat, a threat to our value, our self-esteem, a threat to whether we feel respected, loved, valued, good enough, a threat to our cultures, our religion, anything that we feel threatened by will generate that response. So
Yeah.
if we're lacking confidence and we're maybe not feeling like we're doing our job very well, and someone says something a certain way, we might take it the wrong way and feel threatened, and that might make us feel really uptight and anxious. So yes.
Yeah.
So does that make sense?
It does, but what I'm thinking of is, like when you're talking about the 21st century stress, maybe the threat is even greater now in terms of its regularity. Because,
Yeah.
if you weren't in the fight or flight, back in the day, maybe you weren't there all the time. But today it can be pretty relentless, can't
Yes.
it?
It can be, and also it can be a bit of a spiral, because when we're feeling stressed, we struggle to think clearly. We become more reactive, more dependent on our emotions, and then that affects how we then perceive other things. So it's a sort of exponential in a sense. We become more vulnerable to perceiving things as threats, which aren't meant to be. So someone might say something to you, which is totally fine, but because of the way we're feeling, we perceive it as a threat. So
Yeah.
yes, so stressors are the things that make us feel stressed. And they usually do so by making us feel overly anxious or worried, under too much pressure, or a mixture of both. And when it comes to pressure, that's interesting, because different people handle pressure differently. Some people, and I would admit, I'm down at the end of the scale where I don't function great under pressure. I function at my best when I don't feel pressurized. Other people at the other end of the spectrum are highly motivated by pressure. They're energized by pressure, and they work to tight deadlines and having a lot going on, and that drives them and energizes them. But wherever you are on this scale, there will come a point beyond which that pressure becomes too much and tips you into stress. And it's different for everybody, and it can be more than one thing. It can just be work pressure, but then there may be pressure from other areas of your life, and suddenly you tip over into stress, and that's where it becomes a problem.
It becomes a problem. And actually, I wish you could see the chat right now, because I can see a lot of comments coming through where people are recognizing what you're saying in terms of their life and how they handle things. So this comes on to the very important thing then about what can we do? How can we help ourselves?
Right. So I thought I would you do give three categories of advice here. So the first one, I want to talk about stressors. And a tool that I use with my clients and use with myself is the serenity prayer. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. There's a useful acronym, CIA: control, influence, accept. They're both saying the same thing. We need to conserve our energy for those things where we have some control or influence, and find ways to accept, or not to ruminate over those things we can't do anything about. So I would advise people to make a list of their stressors, to take some time to think, right, what is actually making me feel stressed at the moment? And being aware of the way you may not be feeling stressed right now, but things that do make you feel more stressed. Then look at each one in turn and think, right, is there something I could do to make this less stressful for me? And then make a plan of action. So that's the first tip. The second one is about our unhealthy coping behaviors. And now my message to you about these is, let them be a treat, not a treatment for underlying issues that need attention. So in other words, when you're reaching for a glass of wine, or you're reaching for another packet of biscuits, ask yourself why. Why am I reaching for this? So, for instance, maybe it's because I'm feeling really anxious. Well, then maybe let me think about other ways I can deal with anxiety. I'll do some other bits of advice from Rebecca, or I'll look at her book, or I'll go and look online how to manage anxiety. Maybe I'm drinking caffeine because I'm not sleeping very well. Well, rather than just not sleeping well and drinking the caffeine, let me see what I can do to improve my sleep, which there's quite a nice little bit in my book about that. And obviously with nuts, flushes and sweats, then that's more complex, but there are some non-HRT related things that can help with those, including diet, cutting out alcohol, cutting out caffeine and sugar, but also HRT can help significantly with vasomotor symptoms, flushes and sweats. So basically address the why. And if you can't address the why, then my message is to encourage you to employ simple joys, which are healthy. So ask yourself, what are the little things in life that make me happy? So for me, it's having a mug of tea out of a beautiful mug, wearing some colourful socks, playing the piano for 5 minutes, looking at the birds on the bird feeder, going and just looking at my garden, or being in the garden. Little things you can do quickly. So rather than reaching for your glass of wine or something, you can reach for one of your simple joys and let them uplift you, but be healthy in the process and not cause you harm. So that's the two things. And then we move on to some basic stress advice. Now, again, I'm not going to go through everything. I haven't got time to go through everything, so I just thought I'd focus on a few things. So if we think about mental health, I'd like to encourage the whole concept of mindful living, which I didn't really understand until recent years. A lot of our stress is when we're busy analysing things that we've said or done, thinking, oh, I shouldn't have said that, or I wish I hadn't done that, or why did they say that? What did they mean by that? Or we're worrying about things that might or might not happen in the future. Mindful living is about really focusing on your thoughts onto what you are doing right now. And it basically means feasting your senses. If you're eating a meal, look at it, look at the colours, look at the steam rising off it, feel it, feel the texture as you eat it, smell it, taste it. If you're looking at a scene in the garden, again, think, what can I see? What can I hear? What can I feel? What can I taste? Whatever. So really embrace your senses as you go through life in each moment of your day as much as you can. And the other thing is the attitude of gratitude. It is very, very easy to get caught up in the negatives. Something goes wrong. Oh, I'm having a rubbish day. And then that affects how we perceive other things that go on. We focus on the negatives. An attitude of gratitude is a conscious effort to notice the little positives in the day. Even if it's someone just smiles at you in the street, the sun's actually shining, which is lovely in Scotland. It's not not a common. Notice the little things. Talk about the little things that are good and that are positive. When it comes to our physical health, I won't bore you with the general advice, but I would talk about breathing. When we're feeling anxious and stressed, our breathing tends to become shallower and faster, and that perpetuates that feeling of stress. So really focus on some breathing exercises that can just help you do longer, slower breaths and deeper breaths. 6-8 is quite a good one to remember, where you breathe in for the count of 6, but out for the count of 8. And diaphragmatic breathing, which is where you breathe to the bottom of your lungs, which pushes your diaphragm down. That makes your belly stick out, but that is your lungs being filled right to the bottom. The movement of the diaphragm triggers a nerve impulse to the heart, which then slows it down and reduces your blood pressure. So it physiologically calms you down. And that's something you can look up on YouTube. The best way to learn is lying down and putting your hand between your belly button and your rib cage, and that you should see your hand going up and down. And then movement. Now, exercise is more structured, and some people struggle to find the time, or maybe for health reasons can't engage in exercise. But I would encourage exercise where you can. But movement is fundamental, especially if you're at a screen for much of the day. Regularly get up, move your neck, your shoulders, your arms, your hips, your legs. Move it, walk around the house. Just keep moving. Don't just sit in one position. When it comes to your spiritual or emotional health, two things. One is nature. Try and incorporate nature into your day, whether it's just watering some plants in the house, whether it's going for a walk, watching birds on a bird feeder, noticing the natural world. It's incredibly therapeutic. And the other thing is doing things that you enjoy. I've touched on simple joys, but think about the bigger joys, as in, spending time with the people you love, engaging with a hobby, doing whatever it is, something that maybe takes a longer time that you can enjoy, because these things will rebuild you and recharge you. For overwhelm, when you're in a minute of feeling totally uptight, you can't think clearly, and you're panicking and you're anxious, there are two particularly important things. One is the breathing, which I've touched on. That will help you feel physically calmer. The other is a grounding tool known as the 5-4-3-2-1, where you just say to yourself, 5 things I can see, and you name them out loud. 4 things I can touch or feel. 3 that I can hear. 2 I can smell. 1 I can taste. Even if you only do the first 2 or 3 of those, that gets your brain engaged on something, and that will actually just help your primitive brain switch off, and your rational brain get back into gear. And then finally, an acronym that you might find useful when you're struggling in life is STAN, the name short for Stanley. S, spend time with people who make you feel good about yourself. If you're running on empty, if you're struggling, the last thing you need is to be with people who judge you, criticize you, drain you, offload onto you. You need to be with people who are in a place where they can build you up and support you. T, talk to someone about how you're feeling. A, ask for help. Have the courage to ask for help. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength and humility to recognize that you need help and to ask for it. And N is no. It's learning to say no, which basically means learning to put in boundaries and to say, I'm afraid I can't do that. Or if you want me to do that, I can't do this. Which one do you want me to do? But recognizing your limitations and communicating that to the people around you. And I have come up with a concept of a stress self-check-in framework where you basically check in on yourself on a regular basis. And I would encourage once a month sitting down and checking in on yourself. Number one, ask yourself 3 questions. Number one, what are my stressors at the moment? You write them down. Number 2, am I engaging any unhealthy coping behaviors, and are they getting out of control? And write them down. And number 3, am I exhibiting any symptoms of stress? And then you come back to the answers, which is number 1, serenity prayer, work through your stressors and make a plan. Number 2, look at your unhealthy coping behaviors, ask why, reflect on your simple joys that you could use instead. And number 3, using some of these tools to nurture your mental, physical, and emotional health. And if you do this check-in on a regular basis, you can then tweak and reset yourself, which will make it less likely that your primitive brain will remain in control and allow your rational brain to get on board.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. That's such a lot of information sharing there. And I'm delighted to say we will be writing up all of the notes from this. So when we send out the recording, because I'm thinking, oh, I've got to write that one down. I've got to write that one down. But it's actually great to see all of the comments in the chat, because I think you're really hitting a chord with many of our people that recognise what they're doing and what they might need to change. And somebody is, I was interested to see when you said, step away if you can't change something, and somebody said that they are muting their ex, which I thought was quite an interesting approach. Clearly very important to them.
That's
But we
really
will
big.
write all of these notes down and send them on to everyone, but do also look for Rebecca's book. Sally, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I've said we can't answer all the questions that have come through because, and firstly, so we always say in these sessions, thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. People have shared what they're struggling with. People have shared top tips, given reassurance to people. And it's what we love about this community, that everyone is, you know, we all get it and we're all in this together. So thank you so much for that. I have put a link into the Menopause Hub, which has got all of the things that we've run before, which answers some of the questions that have come in. But a couple of things that I just wanted to pick up on was around the increased cortisol and the visceral fat and holding on to fat, and what's kind of going on in the body in terms of, is there a link when people are stressed? Is it harder for people to lose weight? And just any kind of thoughts you had about that, Rebecca?
It is actually really complex, the impact of stress on the various hormones within the body. It affects things like there's a satiety hormone, there's a hunger hormone, therefore it affects the dynamic between yes, feeling hungry, feeling full. Also, because when you're stressed, your body's craving energy, so that makes you more likely to crave the things that are highly calorific, hence the sugar and the fatty foods that people crave. And in terms of the body distribution of fat, I think that is largely a hormonal thing, but I think it's not entirely. So I think, again, we can't help ourselves going through the menopause, but if we can really watch what we're eating and trying to maintain a more constant sugar balance, so eating low glycemic energy foods, like low glycemic energy foods, which release the sugar more slowly and more constantly, is better than having something that's highly sugared. So your sugar level goes up, your insulin is then released, which then your sugar goes down, and you're kind of got this up and down of sugar levels. So I suppose it's just and sleep is paramount, not just if you can. It's about really prioritizing sleep in every which way you can, because sleep, as Deborah alluded to earlier, is not just resting. There's fundamental things going on in your body while you're sleeping, and there is evidence to suggest that the fasting for 12 to 14 hours between your last meal on the one day and your next meal on the next day can have health benefits in terms of sugar levels and hormones. So when we're sleeping, basically our brain is doing all sorts of things regarding our processing of our memories, from short-term to long-term memory banks, putting the knowledges that we've accrued in that day into the context of everything else that's gone on in our world. So that's what our dreaming's doing. Dreaming is actually the processing of our memories. And also we have our hormonal changes and equilibrating and normalizing overnight, and also repairing. So, you know, if we think of a lot of illnesses caused by damaged cells, well, sleep is when the damaged cells are either repaired or got rid of. That's when we have our cleansing. And that's so much important stuff is going on when we sleep. So it really is trying to do everything you can to try and help your sleep if you can. And then Yes, the things like muscle mass and bone strength tend to reduce in women once they've gone through the menopause and estrogen levels have declined. So encouraging not just walking, but exercise that strengthens other muscles, and as well as your cardiovascular fitness is good if you can, and eating diet. I can't touch on all these things. There's so many different things here, but
I know.
it's complicated.
But I think it just really helps people to understand that. And so many people have said they love the treat not treatment, they love the STAN acronym. So there's been some really great things that people have been able to really take away from this. So thank you so much to everyone that's been sharing in the chat.
Yes, the link to Rebecca's book is in the chat too. So thank you very much. I can't stress, we will write these notes out and we'll add a link in there to Rebecca's website and book as well, because you've clearly been a hit with us today, Rebecca, and we really appreciate all of your top tips. And thank you again to everybody that's joining us. Like you, Sally, if there was an attitude for gratitude for me today, it would be, look at how people are helping each other. How lovely is that? That is just such a remarkable thing to happen.
Wonderful. Well, thank you.
Sorry?
No, I was just going to say thank you so much for having me, because it's actually, in my GP experience and in my work now, I'm so aware of the struggles that women are having through this very difficult time of life. So it's wonderful that people can come to somewhere to hear more about it and to discuss it and feel supported.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us, Rebecca and Sally. And have a lovely week, everyone. All the best.